here at Cornell, so we're going to get started, and I anticipate having folks come on as we go along. So I just want to welcome everybody to today's webinar. This is Heidi Muyeso-Kunzman with the Community and Rural Development Institute at Cornell. Excuse me, I knew that was going to happen. It's the Community and Regional Development Institute at Cornell. We just changed our name, and it's still sticking with the old one. In any case, I'm pleased to welcome you to today's webinar on green entrepreneurship as an economic development strategy. This is the third webinar in our 2010 Sustainable Communities webinar series, and we're very pleased to have you join us today. For those of you who may not be familiar with the Sustainable Communities series, I want to mention that it was developed with the recognition that New York communities, like communities everywhere today, face great challenges, but at the same time, great opportunities. It seems that there's new things happening all the time, and we want to kind of capture those, share those, and help people make informed decisions. So the series is designed to address topics of interest to New York communities and the extension educators and other community developers working in them, as well as the legislators and other local leaders there. We've chosen these topics with the goal of providing information that facilitates informed decision-making at the community level. That is, information which helps communities identify, pursue, and achieve their development goals. With each webinar, we try to bring together a campus-based research or extension professional, a community-based practitioner, and/or an agency representative to provide you with an overview of the subject matter. And I just want to emphasize that these really are about an overview, give you a taste for the topic, and then point you to resources for further information. In this webinar, we're very fortunate to have Linda Dickerson-Hartsock, Vice President of Innovation and Technology at Center State CEO, which some of you may know is an organization that was recently formed through the merger of the Metropolitan Development Association of Syracuse and Central New York, and also the Greater Syracuse Chamber of Commerce. With her is her colleague Mitchell Patterson, also with Center State CEO, and then Lois Kang, who's a Community Development Coordinator with Cornell Cooperative Extension of Chemung County and the Cornell EDA University Center. So Lois will be providing an introduction to community support for entrepreneurship, and Linda will follow that with a discussion of how and what community support for entrepreneurship looks like in the context of the green economy. Mitchell will then take us to the end of the webinar with examples of how communities are strategically and intentionally supporting green entrepreneurs as an economic development strategy. Because webinars are in some ways relatively anonymous, I just want to give you a little bit of information about those joining you for this particular webinar topic, just in case you don't recognize some of the names. If everyone is on that registered, we should have around 40 people. So again, we're expecting a few more, but we also know that a lot of times you have a third that don't participate even after registering, so we'll see. But in any case, we have multiple perspectives and agencies, including the following that are on. We have someone from a Rural Health Network, USDA Rural Development, city, town, county, and national government, entrepreneurs, private enterprise, planning and economic development offices, community action agencies, extension educators, and faculty and staff from higher education institutions. So that's just a sampling. I encourage you to feel free to share any that I've missed and you want folks to take note of by using the chat box on the side of the screen that you're viewing, and we'll go over that in a few minutes for those of you who may not be familiar with how to use the chat box. So before handing the mic over to Lois, I just want to remind you that the webinar will last approximately an hour and a half, including ample time for question and answers. We'll pause throughout the presentation to take a couple of questions after each speaker, and then we'll also have time built in at the end of the session to take additional questions. If there's something as we go along that you want a point of clarification, we'll try to address it sooner than later. So again, we ask that you use that chat box and pose them throughout, and if it's not something that's urgent, we'll just hold and get that at the next session or at the next. So I just want to also take note, or have you take note, after doing several of these webinars, I'm keenly aware that technical issues sometimes arise. So for example, in our last one, we had a few individual participants occasionally losing sound. If it happens to everyone, it's a bigger issue, but a lot of times what we're finding is that if you just get off and re-log in, you'll come back to the sound. So it seems to have to do with bandwidth or whatever your connections out there. But just be patient. If you're willing to go with the flow, we'll keep at it and also go with it at this end. I keep thinking that even though there's technical challenges, it's a lot better than having people have to travel lots of miles to these things. And I do feel like ultimately it's a really nice tool for reaching out for folks. So um, in terms of the chat box, you'll see it over in the middle of your screen. You just enter information or whatever your comment is in the little box, and then you can send it either to everyone, just to the host or participants, or to individual participants. And so you use that little arrow to the right of the blank box once you've entered your information. You can see some people have already done that, and your question or your comment will pop up in that box. So with that, I'm going to turn over the mic to Lois, and we're going to get started. Any questions quickly before we do? I should check in. Okay, with that, Lois.
Hello everyone. My name is Lois Kang. I'm also Sinchan. I am based at Chemung County, Cornell, as the regional community development educator. My main function is to coordinate community and economic development activities of Cornell's EDA University Center in the 13 County South Upstate region, also known as Pipeline Progress region. I've been in my position for about 1 year, and most of my work have centered around our two pilot communities, which are Greater Elmira and Greater Olean. And we've also tried to connect with the broader Southern Tier region as much as possible. We've just completed an energizing entrepreneurship event and workshop last year. Olean and also in Livingston counties. I pretty much have adapted what we've covered last week in using it as an introduction to what Linda initially speaking about. So first, I wanted to kind of start with, what is community support for entrepreneurship? And there really is not a succinct for it. I think is really defined by the community. I really look at it as the community context that facilitates entrepreneurship, which is a process through which entrepreneurs create and grow business and social enterprises. So it is clearly, there is a heavy place-based component. And I believe that some of the key ingredients are broad public and private support. It's not about one or two groups working with entrepreneurs, but the community is engaged. Various different public organizations and interests are engaged, along with the private sector interest as well. And it also focuses on both the business and community environment. And I think we'll talk more about this entrepreneurial climate that we hear about frequently. And also, it is strategic that it is a deliberate action by the community to look at entrepreneurship as a way to support economic development and revitalize, communities across the nation, particularly rural regions that have suffered some decline over the past, decades. Are really looking at entrepreneurs to revitalize their communities. So it is definitely a strategic support coordinated across community and region. So what are some of the reasons why community leaders should really look at entrepreneurship as an important strategy to enhance your community's economic development? And I am sure these are sort of, I wanted to quantify some of the already reasons that you already know. So I wanted to just start with numbers, job creation. A study by US SBA in 2003 looked at the job creation. Clearly expanding businesses and new businesses are generating the new jobs. And business relocation was contributed to about 1% of in more recent studies, the Kaufman Foundation shed some light on what is happening in the for communities to really think about this dynamic that is happening in between 1980 and 2005. Firms operating less than 5 years accounted for all net new job growth. And within that framework, there's a lot of dynamism happening, but that's kind of the key message is the verb age of companies that is the job growth. And also in 2007, looking at a pool of 12 million new jobs, two-thirds were also generated by young firms. So another factor is innovation. Clearly, entrepreneurs are really at the heart of driving innovation in our economy. Some of the statistics are looking at the new inventions coming out since World War II, and look at the radical innovation like the internet and the computer. 95% of them are driven by small. And also another interesting element that I am learning is that young companies really fuel the growth of larger companies. I think they are more fragile to really adapt to the market and contribute to innovation that larger companies want to acquire. So through mergers and acquisitions, they're also adding jobs in addition to providing the innovation needs of the so that's another interesting element to what's happening. And again, I think career option, which is, I think, a growing trend, what we are learning is that there's a strong entrepreneurial interest in our youth and young adults. You have a desire to create businesses, and we're talking a lot about how to really, feed that aspiration into creating entrepreneurs from our youth. And again, lifetime employment is diminishing. So owning a small business is an option to a lot of folks who might be getting displaced during the recession, and that job security is going away. So I think people are looking at creating their own business to maintain lifestyle and maintain. And this is another interesting fact that statistics that came just recently was released is home-based businesses account for more than half of the U.S. businesses, and they employ 1 in 10 private sector workers. Clearly technology is facilitating this process, but I also think that there's some more interesting dynamics such as the diminishing lifetime employment and other factors that that seems to be relevant in our economies that we should pay attention to. And I think this place-based component is something that has been really inspiring for me to be engaged in this work. Is that entrepreneurs could choose to start their business anywhere, but I think there is a certain affinity to where they grew up, where they went to school, and also many of them choose to start their businesses in the areas where they live. So there is a strong connection to the community, and mostly all of them that we've met in our work, they really give back to the community and they reinvest. And they have a really strong, I think of the right word, to really see their worker as part of a community, trying to really maintain that employment base and be competitive in the market as well. And another place-based component is, we talk a lot about businesses that are driven by knowledge. I think every region, every community, there's certain local knowledge base that has developed over time. I think if you look at the southern tier, there's clearly a strong manufacturing knowledge base, that is relevant in our workforce, and also a lot of the small and mid-sized businesses that we've, came to meet in our work. And I think there's some real entrepreneurial and cluster development opportunities there, and hopefully Linda and Misha could guide on that topic. And finally, regional economic growth. In all of the studies that we've looked at, both nationally and regionally, high entrepreneurial activity is directly related to high economic growth. So I think starting in the 1980s, there were more interest in looking at the regional variation. And one of the things that came out was that perhaps a prolonged regional decline is linked to a lack of entrepreneurial activity. So there clearly is a strong correlation with entrepreneurship and regional economic growth, which we're all very interested in. This is a diagram for you to kind of start thinking about different types of entrepreneurs in your community. I think it does a really good job in kind of providing some distinctions, and it also provides a framework for you to link your talent to development efforts that you are engaged in. So, first we have the potential entrepreneurs, aspiring dreamers, startups, and youth. We have more businesses, business ownership through survival, restart, lifestyle, and additional, I think, home-based entrepreneurs looking at perhaps a career option for a lot of people who are being in the economy and where lifetime employment is reaching. And also we have growth entrepreneurs. So growth entrepreneurs represent about 5 to 15% of our population, we are learning, but they generate about 75% of jobs. So growth entrepreneurs are the ones who sets out to really to build firms that are visible and create economic value. They commercialize new technology, and or they are growing really rapidly in other sectors. But I think the important element to growth entrepreneurs is that they capitalize on major opportunities, and they're an important players in the global economy. Every region and have growth entrepreneurs, but are few. Um, so this is an area that I think we are very interested in, more specialized resources, and what are the opportunities there. So once you have a good idea about your talent base, it is really about focusing on your entrepreneurs and what the needs, what the needs they have identified, and it's really about going out there and hearing from them what their needs are, and building a support base at the local and perhaps regional level. Here are some 5 bullet points of common themes rising from the work of Rupert Center for Rural Entrepreneurship. Foremost, entrepreneurs are looking for a supportive environment, an environment that recognizes the contribution that they offer to the community, and a supportive environment. They are looking for an environment that has the local support to encourage them to, kind of go out there and innovate and go after their, creative ideas that they have. They also are looking for easy access to technical assistance. And I think this is an area that we are learning, particularly in how do you organize and bring together various different resources that are available, but make it accessible and make it relevant to what entrepreneurs need. And connection to other entrepreneurs is critical, because not every entrepreneur is the same, and not every entrepreneur. So I think connection to peers and mentors are really critical for them to find new resources, to network, to find the support that they need in their environment. And finally, capital. The right type of capital at the right time and with the right support. I think, particularly in a rural region, talk a lot about kind of the lack of venture capital, perhaps limiting to entrepreneurs, and I think it provides an opportunity for the community to look at the support that they could generate in meeting the gap in services. So this quote, I think, does a nice job of really capturing how communities should really look at building their infrastructure. So it's not about if you build it, they will come. So it is instead, it may be about helping business transition or producing a where to go for what guide or facilitating a network. So this is really about listening to your entrepreneurs and responding to that need. So I did want to talk a little bit about entrepreneurial climate because this is an area that is receiving a lot of interest. Um, so entrepreneur climate is really a place-based element and the environment in which entrepreneurs operate. And a lot of the successful entrepreneur communities pay attention to both the business and community environment. And I have kind of put together some bullet points of factors that influences your climate and that is mentioned often. One is local support, local government support for small businesses. Is again understanding and being aware of the needs of entrepreneurs and responding to them. I think local government plays an important role in the support infrastructure and generating their buy-in and participate in the whole process is critical. Is attitude towards entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs want the freedom to innovate, as we pointed out. So it's encouraging calculated risk taking and being supportive to what they're going after. Community population density is an area that is relevant to rural region and its proximity to metro area. As you have low population density, we're more dispersed and kind of that critical mass is lacking. So that is an area that we are also looking at in a regional context, how more of a critical mass could be created to support entrepreneurs. Another influencing factor is quality of physical infrastructure, again, quality of life, business networks, business services, the availability of small business training and financial resources. Again, your entrepreneurial climate really bringing both the components come together as a creating a infrastructure for entrepreneurship in your community. And I just wanted to end with some couple important points and some action items that community can take immediately and what we are learning through our work. One is really identifying champions in your community. I think leadership is critical if you are going to link entrepreneurship to your economic development plan. It is relatively a new model, and particularly entrepreneur climate is an area that is recently emerged as a model to support economic development. So identifying champions are critical to your effort, and that leads into building leadership among private, public, and nonprofit sector. It is really building a broad support base. And also, I think it's really important to invite entrepreneurship to be part of this process. I'm not sure how your communities are involving the perspectives of entrepreneurs. But as we can see, entrepreneurs, they understand the economy. They are key drivers of job creation, and they should be part of the development process. So I encourage you to, you know, see how they are engaged in the. And again, conducting market research to understand what the needs are. That is something that has been emphasized through Rupert Center for Rural Entrepreneurship in generating a strategy that is focused on entrepreneurs. So it's really going out there and talking with your entrepreneurs and understanding what their needs are and how you can pull your resources together to meet those needs and enhance, develop accordingly. And building on that, in order to put together a resource base, you need to understand your local and regional support assets. So it's really about building on community assets, but connecting to regional resources. Um, and again, collaborative partnership among service provider is an important component. How you are partnering with your other community members, and also understanding the interests of different service provider and how a strong collaborative relationship could be formed.
I think I would just add, Lois, in thinking about our work in the P4P, that we realize that gets more complicated as we move to a regional level, but we're finding some neat ways of making that.
So as a way of forming a service, so making it easy to find that no matter what door they walk through, they are able to get there. And again, an important element is looking at your culture and supportive environment and how to foster that. And one way to achieve that is engaging youth. So in a final note, I think it's really about just looking at the different players in your and forming the leadership to take on the next step. So as a conclusion, I think this diagram again does a nice job in conceptualizing entrepreneurship and economic development, looking at entrepreneurship as the bedrock for attention to your entrepreneurs. You're developing a resource base that supports entrepreneurship, and at the same time, you're also looking at the climate factors that we just went over. So simultaneously, you are working to create an entrepreneur, which also provides an opportunity for your community to be more attractive and to retain companies and industries that are already present in your community. And so overall, we are looking at entrepreneurship in this diagram. We are looking at entrepreneurship as economic development, and also to enhance your existing strategy of retaining and recruiting. So with that, I think we are going to turn it over.
Why don't we take some questions for Lois first? We'll pause for just a minute, and if you have some questions, please feel free to enter those into the chat box at this time. I'll just add while we're waiting to Lois's comment, I think one of the interesting things for me in thinking about that community support and cultivating the culture of community support for entrepreneurs is just, I think, our aversion in our society to risk or failure, and the way we typically look at that. And what we know about entrepreneurs is that those who are very successful often fail several times along the way. And so I think it's really interesting in creating that culture, that it's almost a paradigm shift to think about how to support that part of a development process in a business. Okay, I'm not, oh, we've got one. Can you please give examples of communities that you recommend that are taking these approaches?
I first would recommend for you to look into Littleton, Colorado. They have been engaged in an effort called economic gardening for past 20 years, and I think you could gain a lot of insights about what they're learning in their effort. And also, we were just in Livingston County last week, and Mount Morris has there's a major revitalization effort happening in Livingston County that has completely lost its business space, but it really took an SUNY Geneseo alum and a developer from New York City that has really sparked a whole new revitalization using entrepreneurship. And I think what's interesting about about their effort is that although it took one entrepreneur to kind of spark the effort, the community really came together in supporting the effort, and I think fruits of that is being recognized. And I could also probably send you some more examples of other communities that are engaged in this.
And so we'll give you a link to that website that Lois mentioned in Littleton, Colorado. And this resources that we have up on the screen now is a list that will be posted up on the website for the Sustainable Communities webinar series. And we'll also send you a link to those. We can also attach it as a document at the end of this. We'll send a message to everybody. So we'll pull up some of these additional resources and get those out to you. Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to pull up the next presentation. Okay, Linda, we're all set.
Hi, well, good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who are joining us again and who participated in the last webinar, welcome back. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, thanks for being part of the conversation. So I'm Linda Hartsock. I'm Vice President of Innovation and Technology for Center State Corporation for Economic Opportunity, which, as Heidi mentioned, is a landmark consolidation of two very large, very old regional economic development organizations in the greater Syracuse metro area. The MDA, been around for about 50 years, the Syracuse Chamber of Commerce around probably for well over 100 years. And I think that merger and the creation of this new organization is, in its own way, a great example of community entrepreneurship. The community getting together to say we want to look at how we better align programs, resources, and our own regional assets. And so actually dissolving organizations with long-standing history, bringing them together, and focusing on what will be key for a new 12-county region in terms of core sectors to be looking at. Green is one of them, but really building innovation and entrepreneurship as the platform for this entire new organization. So Mitchell and I are both really excited to be part of that, and we're hoping that as we build this new innovation and entrepreneurship platform, it'll be kind of a living test bed, and other communities can work with us, learn from us as we go, and that over the next couple of years we develop something that becomes perceived as a best model or best practice. So as part of doing that, we have been looking at what some of those best models and best practices are. And we're going to talk about some of them today. We're also going to give you, Mitchell's going to be giving you some great examples both in an urban environment, a rural environment, of things that local communities have done working at the grassroots level to again mobilize some of those resources and create some really, really interesting programs. I also run the Clean Tech Center. The Clean Tech Center is one of NYSERDA's 6 clean energy incubators. They have launched these over the past year to really look at how they advance the development and commercialization of new clean energy technologies, launch new companies, launch new products, and really create across New York State a platform for green entrepreneurship. So for those of you who were on the last call, this will be a little bit of a refresher. For those of you who are joining for the first time, I want to start by just kind of laying out the landscape. So when we talk about green entrepreneurship in local communities, what are we talking about? We're really talking about creating the next generation of companies. And I think for upstate New York, given our asset base, we're at a really exciting time in our history, poised maybe where we were about 150 years ago at the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, now really collectively with the strengths that we have here in terms of our R&D assets and our workforce and state commitments at the precipice of a green revolution, and that revolution is going to play out in communities across the state. And the kinds of entrepreneurs that we see walking through our doors and our counterpart clean energy incubators across the state are seeing come through, and you're going to see in your own community over the next few years, are folks who are developing new renewable energy technologies, folks who are working on alternative fuels, folks who are working on the smart grid and wireless sensors and energy storage and system integration. And I have to tell you, not all of these companies are coming out of university research labs. A lot of them are coming out of garages, and they're coming out of barns. In fact, we had a biofuel company here that literally is working out of a barn, experimenting with feedstocks, literally blowing them up and putting together the engineering designs for grinders, burners to take this technology to the marketplace. Transportation technologies in the southern tier. You've got some companies working on electric vehicle technologies. Cornell really leading in terms of advanced battery technologies and fuel cell research. And then the really big burgeoning sector for green and clean tech over the next 10 years, the whole area of buildings and construction, energy efficient materials and lighting and controls and smart appliances that talk to your smart building, that talk to your smart meter, that talk to your smart grid, and all of, again, the intelligent building systems around that. Environmental systems, again, through our organization, seeing a lot of small community-based environmental engineering firms looking at air and water quality issues, green infrastructure, which is a really hot topic if we've got community planners on the phone looking at how they integrate that into project development scenarios in your own community. And then this whole sort of backdrop of energy conservation specialists, analysts, auditors, installers, insulators, and particularly in the construction area, a real burgeoning sector related to recycling and reuse and waste disposal and deconstruction and green demolition, particularly as more and more communities, companies, and even homeowners are interested in looking at energy efficient building and LEED certification. Very highly specialized support services around this. Again, some of these kinds of small, in fact, home-based businesses growing up in rural parts of upstate New York related to licensing and IP and equity, arranging equity kinds of structures and carbon credits and RECs and folks who are doing specialized market analysis in some of those sectors or who are in technology valuation, particularly with the stimulus money that is out there right now. There is also a cottage industry of technical writers and grant consultants that I think we're going to continue to see over the next couple of years as more federal and state resources are devoted to this sector. And then folks who are doing industry consulting as manufacturing, mainline, legacy manufacturing is looking at becoming green and how they're looking at developing carbon neutral strategies in their workplace as they green the workplace. And then the whole area of green job training, again, becoming an entire new industry as you look at federal and state funding programs that are going to continue to come down the line to develop this next generation of green workers. And those are creating new nonprofit and for-profit service providers. So at the local community level, particularly if you're a rural community, this is a real challenge. You've got this landscape happening. You've got this entire new industry developing almost at rocket pace. So how do you build a community infrastructure to support innovation and entrepreneurship? Because it really requires an entirely new set of skills. Kinds of folks need different kinds of services than traditionally your county IDA can provide. Yesterday I had the opportunity to speak to the entire statewide SBDC network. It was their annual meeting. They gathered here in Syracuse and brought together all of their small business development counselors from across New York State. And again, for many of us who've been involved in sort of mainstream economic development over the last 20 years, we're familiar with what a typical economic development support package looks like, the kinds of public finance tools we use, the kinds of job metrics that we use to measure success. This is really reinventing the economic development wheel to look at how we align those existing programs with what really is a new level of sophistication that local communities will need to develop fairly quickly. Because, as Lois indicated, not only companies can move any place, but entrepreneurs can move any place, and they're going to move to communities that not only have the culture that supports entrepreneurship, but really has, the resource providers and the folks in your community with the skill sets who are going to understand those kinds of things that I just ran through in the last half dozen slides. And then we all know that economic development at the end of the game, at the end of the day, is something that's measured locally. We report to county legislators. We report to the state. We report publicly in the newspaper in terms of how money that's invested in our programs is expended and what kind of results we use. And when you're looking at innovation and entrepreneurship, you can't look at just traditional job metrics. It can be 3-5 years before you see the upside of all of the time and resources that you've invested in that company. So part of it is really a community education process. What is it that we're doing, and how do we measure success? So beyond creating jobs, maybe we're also looking at some of these new metrics, like the number of patents that are being issued, products that are being launched by these companies, how we measure sales growth, capital that companies are raising, new capital that's coming into communities, all of which leads to wealth generation, which, as Lois said, gets reinvested back in the community. And there's some great examples over the last couple of years of companies that we can point to who've done just that. Kionics being a great example, and Ithaca, a early stage entrepreneurial startup that over the last year sold, generated a great deal of wealth for those local investors, which is now being invested back into local companies. So for local economic developers, it really means that you're now building organizations that focus on taking companies through a parallel path. And this is the model that we're using here at the Clean Tech Center. It's the model that the other clean energy innovators around New York State are using. And I think it's a model that works well at local communities because you don't necessarily need to build staff or invest resources in creating this model. What you do need is to put together a great team. So you've got sort of a core team that's professional staff, but you're building mentors and coaches and folks who have expertise in some of these different areas, or you're understanding who your partners are at colleges and universities, particularly when it comes to some of the specialized technology, and you're involving them in this partnership. So that as an entrepreneur walks in the door with an idea at a very early stage, you can put that person, that early stage company, through a parallel track where simultaneously you, your county IDA, your local or regional small business development center, your SCORE folks are working with them on what would traditionally be a business development approach. Let's do a market analysis. Let's work on the components of your business plan. Let's look at who some of your key partners might be, either for funding or for joint ventures. And let's look at your funding strategy. And at the same time, again, you've built a support team with coaches and mentors. And some of these can be local service providers as well, from either your local community, the regional area, or again, your college and universities, who are asking the kinds of questions that local IDAs typically aren't well poised to ask. Let's look at your IP platform. How do we get your technology, which may be the world's greatest idea, to the point where we've identified the resources to build that first prototype, to test that first prototype, to get you to proof of concept? If you've got a technology that has value, what's the next step? Are you going to just license that technology and sell it? Are you going to actually build a manufacturing plan around it? What's that technology worth? Well, what it's worth in your own head isn't worth what investors may think it's worth or what the market thinks it's worth. So how do you find resources to get an independent technology valuation? How do you deal with those licensing issues? What is, as I said before, that best path to commercialization? Is it build it yourself, or is it to subcontract it out to other manufacturers as you kind of put together a supply chain? Is it simply to license it to a bigger fish and you provide consulting services? But then beyond some of the conventional sources of financing that we're all used to dealing with, whether they're, again, public loan guarantee programs like the SBA or USDA or conventional programs, you know, these folks are all going to be pre-revenue. So how do you build the expertise in your community so helping them find those early stages, those early sources of support, whether they're angels in your own community or pre-seed investors. And then finally, ultimately, connections to investors. And so to me, one of the big fallacies that we have upstate is that, gosh, if we just had VC, that would be the answer. You know, the reason we don't have an entrepreneurial climate in upstate New York is we don't have VC in upstate. Well, VC is good, capital's great, it's not the silver bullet. It's just, as you can see, sort of the end of the game. And to get us there, we really need to, again, create at the local level support networks to be taking our entrepreneurs and early stage companies through this path. And then at that point, introducing them to investors by getting them out of town, because I think, honestly, it's going to be unlikely that VCs are going to find us hidden like needles in the haystack across upstate. But if we organize regionally, if we even organize across the state and we create a pipeline of these really promising companies and technologies, we've got one heck of a roadshow that we could take to investors who are still very much looking for deals, and investment in this sector continues to be robust.
Hey, Linda, this is Heidi. I just want to interrupt for 1 second. Just for folks out there who may not be as familiar with some of these terms as us, like IP or VC, would you just, as you go along, mention what those are?
Sure, so I'm going to go back just for 1 second. So IP is intellectual property, and it's what protects your technology, protects the value of your technology. And a VC is a venture investor. So it's someone who invests in your company in exchange for taking a stake in your company, taking ownership in your company. Typically, there are folks, these are folks who are looking for a high rate of return. It's because they're taking a higher risk by investing in you, because you're not necessarily at the place where you've got sales, you've got revenue, you've got a proven track record. They're investing in you because they believe in you and your management team and what it is you've created, but they're taking a lot of risk to do it. So I want to talk a little bit about, again, what some of these unique funding strategies that are really required to grow entrepreneurship. Because again, just to say we want to have a culture that supports entrepreneurs is one thing, but to really put in place the infrastructure you need takes a little bit of understanding of what that infrastructure looks like. And now we're talking about, as you go back to Lois's triangle of slides, we're not necessarily talking about companies that are lifestyle companies. We're not talking about folks who are, opening stores on Main Street, which is wonderful because my background is community planning. It's what we need. What I'm talking about now is that small subset of entrepreneurs who represent those kind of promising, emerging technology, potential high-growth companies. So these are the kinds of companies that start with 2 or 3 people, and over 3 years they're at 20 people, and over 5 years they're at 100 people, and over 10 years they're at 700 people. And it's interesting, if you look across upstate, again, our landscape is dotted with companies like that. I live in Cortland County, small rural county. I can think of great stories like that. My favorite being the Marietta Corporation, cabbage farmers, made sauerkraut, bought a machine to package the sauerkraut so they could sell it in New York City to hot dog vendors along with ketchup and mustard. Sauerkraut string kept getting caught in the packaging, and they thought, darn, we're not going to let this packaging go to waste. What can we do with it? And they got together with a friend of theirs who was a high school chemistry teacher and said, we could put shampoo in this, seal it, and sell it to those hotel chains that are just starting up around the country, those places like Holiday Inn. And from that failure grew a global company. The entire concept of worldwide, guest amenities, they now sell to the 23 top 25 hotel chains in 80 countries around the world. And again, entrepreneurs in a local community with an idea, learning from failure, recovering, moving on. So I'm talking about, now they employ about 800 people just in the local community, and they've got plants around the world. So I'm talking about companies that have the promise of becoming businesses that really, for your community, become the next generation of legacy businesses. And so what do they need? They need sources of capital at the early stage before they're earning revenue. And where does that come from? Well, typically it comes from family, friends, and fools, and then it comes from angels. And across New York State, there are 11 organized angel networks. They're part of an association called NIAN, the New York State Angel Network. Chances are there is an angel group somewhere around New York State within proximity to you. There are also folks who are very interested in
Linda? Okay, I think we just lost Linda. Hold on, everybody. I'm going to give her a call back. Hey, we've got Linda back with us, so we're back on. Thanks for your patience.
I thought I was talking too long. So anyway, within every community, there are also folks who help structure some of those early angel investments. And typically, they're the lawyers and the accountants in your community who have as their clients very often individuals who are looking to make those kinds of investments in local companies. So again, as you're thinking about building your own network at the local community, involving some of those successful serial entrepreneurs, involving some of those professional service providers, as well as some of the angels in your community. When companies get to the point where they've completed their proof of concept, again, it could be for their wind turbine, it could be for their solar cell, it could be for their little energy storage device, and they're ready to go to market, then at that point you look at taking them through a first round and then going through some of these other rounds. And again, understanding some of these other sophisticated financing tools is not so much a challenge for you to know all of this at the community level, but to know who to call. And again, those 6 NYSERDA clean energy incubators are good places to start, because all of us are in the business. We've been commissioned by NYSERDA in New York State to really be the source of information and support for you and your local communities to help companies through that process. And again, part of that is also understanding how you integrate those sort of unique finance tools with programs that most of you are probably very familiar with, your local and regional revolving loan funds, the Division of Housing and Community Renewal, Community Development Loan Funds, which many communities administer, as well as SBA and USDA loan guarantee programs. And what you have available at your own community in terms of public sector finance tools, IDA benefits, as well as the zone programs. So again, the challenge is really understanding this new world and realizing that these folks aren't necessarily going to find us, that it's part of your challenge to reach out, to be reading the trade press, to be following this, and to really understand who those resources are within your region and outside of your region. And then looking at some of the specialized programs that New York State has in place. So the Office of the State Controller has a $500 million Green Strategic Investment Fund designed really to help green entrepreneurs, with the state coming in as a co-investor. And then looking to NYSTAR, which is the New York State Technology and Academic Research Authority, and their resource partners, which include the Centers of Excellence across the state, Centers for Advanced Technology, and your regional technology development centers. Very often, as part of talking to a company, they'll say, gosh, I need to build a $2.5 million manufacturing pilot plant to get my technology up and going. If you do a little research, you discover that those specialized facilities or equipment already exist in New York State, either at one of the NYSTAR academic centers or at a corporate research partner, and it's as simple as striking a relationship to lease time as opposed to capitalizing those resources, which can be a lot easier for company in terms of managing cash flow. So this, I think, says that, going forward, all of us at the local economic and community development level have a new role to play. And beyond, what we did in the past was we put together deals. What we really need to be going forward are innovation information brokers. So again, not folks who know it all, but folks who know how to get to people, who know all the pieces to be able to put it together as part of this new infrastructure, really spinning that larger regional and statewide support web so that you and your community become, again, not the answer person, but the nexus for connecting traditional economic development with investors, with serial entrepreneurs, and with new markets and new opportunities. And as I mentioned, you really have allies in this program, and they are NYSERDA's 6 clean energy incubators who really, again, have the mandate from NYSERDA to walk companies through the path from research to commercialization and early stage funding. So I just want to share with you where they are. Clean Tech Center is here in Syracuse. We serve all of central upstate New York. There is a clean energy incubator at the University of Buffalo. It's called Directed Energy. There's one at SUNY Albany at the College of Nanoscience, and it's called iClean. There's one in the New York City area called NYC ACRA, ACRE, at Brooklyn Polytechnic Institute, NYU. There's one at RIT. There's one at Stony Brook. And then again, supporting that landscape of entrepreneurship across the state is the Business Incubator Association of New York, which has 30 members. There are actually 40 incubators operating across the state who also can help you provide a lot of this specialized expertise. The SBDC network is really beginning to focus on this. Both the SBA and USDA Rural Development all have new areas of policy focus on green. So I would encourage you to explore some of those new green relationships with your SBDCs, your local community colleges. We have here Green Business Development Days that we hold every month with the SBDC. We bring in SBDC counselors. We meet with entrepreneurs together to talk about business development and technology development. We do local programming together. We this summer we'll be putting on a Green Resource Expo, bringing all of the different resource providers together so that green entrepreneurs can look at who are the funders and put a face to some of those programs. One of the real obstacles that we see is, particularly at the local community level, is figuring out who are going to be the early adopters, who are going to be the first folks to say, I'm willing to try that technology or take a risk on the idea that this entrepreneur has. And that means that part of the challenge is building the market at the local level. So it means working with local governments to look at how they're instituting green procurement and policy initiatives, how maybe they're setting green building standards, what's going on in terms of green community education, how you're setting sustainability goals. Our best ally in Syracuse is actually the Syracuse Post-Standard, which publishes a publication called Green CNY that not only offers tips but profiles green entrepreneurs. They recently collaborated with us to run a green entrepreneurship contest throughout their entire circulation area and profile the winners, which was a great way not only to identify who some of those people are so that we could work with them, but really to reward them for doing that. Creating green incentives. A number of IDAs around the state have created green pilots to encourage LEED construction. Some have instituted, others are looking at green revolving loan funds, green business award programs, and right now the SCDC in Onondaga County, which is based here in Syracuse, is actually putting in place the finishing touches for a green business certification program. And the idea is to work with companies to really help them deal with sustainability issues and ways in which developing some of those best practices can help them reduce the bottom line. This is our sort of platform in terms of what we do and how we build it, and I know Heidi will share this later on. So summing it up, I think it's an exciting time, it's a challenging time, but the mandate for your community is really to organize yourself and position yourself as the go-to place for high-tech and non-tech green startups to figure out how you create your own entrepreneurship ecosystem. And that starts really by figuring out what you're good at. Not everybody is going to be the solar capital of North America. Not everybody's going to be the wind capital of North America. But chances are there's something related to where you are and who your regional assets and what they are that's going to position you at being good at something. And I think starting there, really identifying those assets, as Lois said, connecting them with experienced startup talent, identifying some of that private growth capital both within and outside of your region is important. And right now, all of us in every community have a lot of talent on the street. Great people who've come out of mid-level roles in manufacturing, folks who could be redeployed working as consultants with some of these companies, or even coming in as operations and production folks at an early stage in exchange for an equity or ownership stake in the company. And then finally increasing links between the angel investors in your community, venture investors, to try to put together those packages. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mitchell, who has done a great job developing the emerging business portfolio for formerly the MDA and now the CEO, and who's going to give you some great case examples.
And Linda and Mitchell, I just want to give folks 1 second to ask questions of Linda before we move on to you, Mitchell.
No problem.
Any questions? Okay, Mitchell, why don't you get us started, and if they come in after, we'll address them at the end.
Okay, no problem. It's going to be 2 tough acts to follow, but hello, everybody. My name is Mitchell Patterson, and I work for the Center State CEO, formerly of the MDA in Syracuse and Central New York. I've been working here now for a little over 2 years, working on developing and really building a database of companies throughout 12 counties, 14 depending on who you ask, in Center State, Central Upstate New York, as far south as Broome or Tompkins, as far north as St. Lawrence, Jefferson, Lewis, east Herkimer, Oneida, and then west we make it to Seneca Falls. I am specifically the program manager for 2 programs that work with innovation, technology commercialization, IP development, as well as entrepreneurship. The first being the Emerging Business Competition, which is a $200,000 business competition for the counties within our region. They submit every year in January. We have 4 rounds of judging, and then we follow that up with a competition that has the top 10 presenting in person, and then the top 5 present in front of the public. This year we gave away $200,000. All 4 winners, since Cardi is on the phone, have come out of Cornell. Some great technology, some great companies, some great entrepreneurs down there. The other program I manage is Grants for Growth, which is what I will actually focus on. Grants for Growth is the product of a research study white paper that was completed about 6 years ago by Richard Florida and Battelle Catalytics. Richard Florida, who many probably know as the creative class, the knowledge economy, recommended that we really work with industry, academic partnerships, commercialization of IP, and really harnessing the 35 colleges and universities that lie within our region and almost $2 billion of university-sponsored research that takes place in upstate New York. What we created was, with help from the New York State Senate and earmarks, a $75,000 matching grant program that actually has to be an industry partner. It can be large industry or it can be small industry. I'll give specific examples in a minute. And an academic research institution. And the idea is they have to be commercializing or improving a new product and or service. We've issued now $1.6 million worth of grants, 19 of them specifically targeting green in biosciences, agriculture, environmental systems, as well as energy. If you can see, it's a $75,000 grant. It's been very successful. We've actually beaten most rates and have seen jobs created with an average salary of $60,000 plus at $17,000 a clip. So we're doing pretty well in that department. The general objectives, like I said, link regional industries and universities, ensure effective and efficient technology and knowledge transfer to industry, strengthen university research capacity. We've picked 8 industry clusters that we're really strong in that exceeds green, but really are focused on future and emerging technologies. Biosciences and biotechnology and energy really seem to be popular. Creation of jobs and deliver economic impact, enhance scientific career and skill development, increase the retention of the best and brightest graduate students. This is to combat the famous brain drain, where the population of upstate New York has shrank over the past 30 or 40 years. I will tell you one thing that has been great about this program is it's been a great tool to help us identify the entrepreneurs. By putting a little money out, there's that carrot that we can really find the best and brightest. We can support early stage research. We can alleviate the cost. And one aspect that I will say that may not be seen in the statistics is that even some of the grant applications that weren't awarded, the industry and academic partner decided to move forward either way. So we've really found a great way to partner up our brilliant researchers with some of our local business savvy entrepreneurs.
Mitchell, we had a question come in, if you can pause for just one moment, and that was, can you just clarify where the funding for that program comes from, please?
The funding has been provided right now by 2, and I'm not sure right now, but perhaps 3 earmarks, all provided by the New York State Senate. At this point, we've received $2 million, and we may have that number up to $3 million, depending on where things go over the next 12 months.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I have 3 examples here on the screen that you can see. The first one being E2E. They were one of our first applicants, and they also were a winner of our emerging business competition. If any of you do not know Pat Govang, Pat is an entrepreneur. He was the entrepreneur in residence at the Johnson School at Cornell and now manages and owns E2E. We supported it with a $50,000 grant, and they have now created, using flax and soy resin, a moldable plywood that is actually stronger, I believe, by almost 25% than standard wood, and completely biodegradable. An amazing product, and I believe Pat has gone from 2 employees to almost 20. The second project I highlighted was with an engineering firm in central New York, O'Brien and Gear, who worked with Clarkson University, and they actually are working on vertical wind turbines, but instead of working on the turbine themselves, they were working on the axis and the rotor and the engine. The third is a company, Antech, who is one of Linda's Clean Tech Center applicants, and Antech has been working for, I believe, almost 6 or 7 years now on 3 different technologies. The technology that we supported was actually a biological battery, and this was supported about 4 years ago. Not many people had heard of it, and it's actually now becoming a popular investment for early stage investment. I now want to go on and discuss two other projects, one being an urban project and the next being a rural project. The second project I have is Green Train. Green Train is a collaboration of St. Joseph's Hospital on the north side of Syracuse, the Prospect Hill district. If any of you know the geography of Syracuse, right where 690 and I-81 meet, there's a pretty large hospital. They are conducting right now, they're starting a $268 million expansion. And while they are doing that, they are really trying to revitalize the neighborhood around there. There's a lot of new construction. There is a lot of dilapidated or vacant housing that they are attempting to rebuild. So a partnership between the Northside Collaboratory, the hospital, the former NGA, the Center State CEO, CNY Works, which is our local WIB, OCM BOCES, and the City School District, we have put together a program known as Green Train. The program is specifically made to work with locals in the neighborhood who are either unemployed or underemployed and provide green training, specifically weatherization and construction training. This has been extremely successful. They've had 28 graduates in 2 classes, and they are about to graduate a third class of 17 next week, I believe. All but one of the first 2 classes graduates have been employed either by local construction workers or have started up their own contracting firms. This has been a great program where we've seen private business, public entities, not-for-profits, everyone kind of come together, notice a need, notice a place where something could easily be made into job creation, and it's been a great program. The second program I would like to discuss is an rural example. It is the Lionsdale Biomass Facility. Any of you know where Lionsdale is? It is in Lewis County, and they had an old biomass facility that basically had been shut down. The logging community, which was very strong in their economy, had almost come to a halt. And with help from the local IDA, local help from regional not-for-profits in the New York State, they were able to recruit a company actually out of Texas called Catalyst Renewables, which has brought the plant back to life. They've opened up a office in downtown Syracuse, as well as the plant itself. It has in turn revitalized the logging community, almost $500,000 annually going back into the economy just through loggers alone. The facility is also producing 19 megawatts of electricity, providing cheap, efficient electricity for Lionsdale and Lewis County. It's been a great program, and they're providing steam to Burroughs Paper Corporation cheaper, allowing them to also stay in business. So this has been a great project where we've seen people come together from all over, actually the urban, the rural settings, New York State, and revitalize an old plant, recruit a company from afar, and actually put an old industry back in place. Right now, I just really wanted to say that a lot of these programs have all been put in place with sort of collaboration, and this has been something that we as Center CEO have really tried to focus on, as well as green sector development. We have a workforce here. We have an academic resource that really needs to be taken advantage of, and I'm actually just going to end it with that, guys.
Great, thank you, Mitchell and Linda. And so we can open up for questions now. I would encourage you to start with Linda and Mitchell, but we can also go back if you have any questions for Lois as well. I would, while we're waiting, just add that I think what we're seeing in the P4P region, in the communities that we're working with, is following up on what Mitchell was saying about collaboration, I think there's some really neat and innovative partnerships that are starting to form. They're very nascent, but certainly there's a stronger desire to be connecting to the research opportunities that are happening in our institutions in New York State, and I think that's exciting. So we do have a question that's just come in. How do the current budget struggles figure to impact these state funding sources? So I think those are the sources that you were talking about, Mitchell. And maybe the other ones as well, Linda, for some of the funding that you were talking about for the centers.
I think with the way the economic development is taking place in New York right now, I think there are a lot of questions. They will impact us in the short term, but I really think there's enough partners here, there's enough going on, and there's enough of an effort being put forth to make sure that all of these are more sustainable and not just funded by one earmark after another. So short term, I would say that there will be some difficulties, but I believe long term it'll be a lot better.
Okay, and another, go ahead, Linda.
I was going to say, overall, in terms of really developing an entrepreneurial innovation economy, New York State remains challenged. So I was on the Governor's Small Business Task Force over the winter, and we looked at what other states were doing to grow the innovation economy. It's very clear that New York State has a serious gap when it comes to early stage in seed capital. Other states, Pennsylvania is a great example, has fabulous programs like the Ben Franklin Fund. So a group did get together, put together a proposal to create a new technology seed fund, which would be a one-to-one match, so that as angels or other investors came on board, and it would be a regionally based program. The state would have the ability to match some of that early stage investment to help seed some of these entrepreneurs. That proposal is still in the Assembly's budget. I believe the governor has just withdrawn it from his because of the budget deficit, so it remains to be seen. NYSERDA, again, I can't say enough great things about NYSERDA. NYSERDA has clearly committed funding to early stage development of all sorts of green and clean energy companies. NYSERDA's fund is a public authority, so it's not part of the state budget. It's funded through the system benefit charge on your utility bill. Just a great organization and really have a strategic focus on growing green entrepreneurship. So I'm really pleased about that resource base. And New York State is very lucky in that way. We're one of the few states in the country that have that kind of well-funded resource to grow the green economy. So the good news is we have NYSERDA. The bad news is New York State's budget is really, really in critical shape. And so I think, funding remains precarious. All that said, there are a lot of innovative things communities can do at the local level that, again, don't cost a lot of money. And I think, if you look at examples of companies that have done well and grown to be big companies, they've started with small investments by local folks who decided to step up to the plate and be angels to help launch some of these companies. And if there's anything communities can do, I think in these times, is really to look at how they develop those networks of angels in their own community. People who want to be coaches, who want to be mentors, who want to be advisors, who want to help invest just a little to launch these companies, and are willing to give their time and their resources and their expertise to grow the next generation in their own community.
And I would just add that certainly fits well with what we heard from Rupri last week in terms of looking to your own community for sources of funding through the capital that is existing there in places that may not be obvious. So, okay, we have a couple other questions for Mitchell. Mitchell, can you speak to the overall operating budget for Green Train and from what sources that budget comes from? And then secondly, describe the IP ownership from the Grants for Growth program.
With regards to Green Train, the money has come from multiple sources, whether it be the actual program manager works for the Northside Collaboratory. He works under the individual who is managing the entire Prospect Hill development, who works for Center State CEO. And the price for the actual program itself was paid for through CNY Works as well as a federal grant that they were able to receive. For the second question, IP ownership with Grants for Growth, actually we do not want to get in between anyone in IP battles. So as part of the application process, when they apply, they have to have an existing signed IP agreement that would go into place the minute the grant was awarded.
Great. Any other questions? Okay. While we're waiting for that, Lois, Linda, or Mitchell, do you want to share any parting comments?
I think we just want to thank people for their continued interest. It's been great to see so many folks on the last call and this call as well. Again, it's such an area of opportunity for local communities and really a way in which they can take an active role in shaping their future. And we want to remind them that, if there are plenty of resources out there, again, we're going to point you to those websites that are up on the screen. This is, I think, a game in which we all win. Regions are not competing against each other to build this new economy. We're in this together. So any way in which we can help, I know that we're more than willing to do.
And I just want to add to Linda's comment about kind of the importance of the community driving this process and owning this process. And I think the collaboration that's going to really mature into, that's going to be working for community, it has to really begin with community ownership. And I think all of you are part of that effort. So I encourage you to really work with your network, and it's really about creating a future vision for your community and region. And following that through and identifying those key leaders that can really step up and influence the process.
Mitchell, anything from you?
No, I'd just like to say thank you, everybody, for listening on the call. And if there's any questions that come afterwards, feel free to ask. I'm more than willing to be helpful to anyone.
Great, and we can make sure that your contact information is sent out when we send out the rest of these materials too, so I appreciate that offer. With that then, if there are no other questions, I'm just going to share a couple of logistical comments again, but first just want to thank you all for joining us and ask that you join me in thanking Linda, Mitchell, and Lois. I think they did a really nice job in kind of giving us the big picture and then thinking more specifically about how entrepreneurship and green entrepreneurship in particular are being pursued at communities and regions. So thank you all very much. And just to let you know, you'll receive an email from me in the next couple of days with a link to an evaluation for today's webinar, and we hope that you will take the time to complete it. Your feedback is both important and very useful to us. So please take a moment to do that. And in addition, once our web manager has a chance to get it up online, we'll be sending you a link to the PowerPoint for this presentation, the list of resources that we've been referring to, and then as well as a couple of other things that were identified in the presentation. We'll send you links to those. And then if all has gone well and as planned, we have been recording the webinar, and we'll have an archived recording of this session posted up on the website as well. So I also want to just remind you that we have 2 other webinars scheduled for this semester, and that we're lining up a couple for next fall. On June 22nd, Professor Tom Herschel from Cornell's Department of Development Sociology will be engaging some guests who will be speaking on prospects for fighting poverty in the 21st century, strategies and methods for communities. And we'll also be looking at innovative leadership programs in communities and also workforce development programs. And those last 2 will probably be sometime this fall. We'll be marketing these more and posting the online registration form up on the Cardi Sustainable Communities website as we get closer to those dates. So stay tuned. And so with that, again, thank you all very much, and we'll be signing off.